Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Political Capital's team, I very warmly welcome all of you who joined us today. Today's event aims to present you the main findings of the research we've conducted recently concerning the Hungarian government's disinformation influence in Hungarian minority communities in Romania, Slovakia, and Ukraine. My name is Bulcsú Hunyadi, and I'm head of programs at Political Capital. With my colleague, Loránd Győri, Political Capital senior analyst and an expert in analyzing disinformation narratives, and our panelists, we will guide you through this topic today. And here I want to use the opportunity to sincerely thank our partners, who are also the panelists today, for their cooperation, because we could not have conducted this research without their expertise and support. And so our panelists and our partners are Zoltán Sipos, editor-in-chief of Átlátszó Erdély, a Hungarian language investigative media outlet and watchdog in Romania, Karin Kővári Solymos, an investigative journalist at the Investigative Center of Jan Kuciak in Slovakia, and András Soltész, journalist at Város, a magazine in Ukraine's Transcarpathia region. Unfortunately, our partner from Serbia could not join us today. Hence, we will focus on the three countries represented by local experts here. The study, which will summarize the results of our findings of our research, will be published next week, and we will be happy to send it to you once it's out. Now we will present the main findings of our study with my colleague Loránd Győri, and then a panel discussion will follow. After that, we will have a Q&A session. However, also during the presentation and during the panel discussion, you can put your questions or comments in the Q&A box below in Zoom. So without further ado, I will start the presentation by providing a background to our research, and then Loránd will present the main findings. However, before delving into the subject, it's important to clarify exactly what we will talk about today. I would like to distinguish between two things: the support of Hungarian minority communities and the representation of their interests, which we think is a legitimate goal and the duty of any Hungarian government, and the exploitation of these communities for power, political, or party political interests. And we will talk about the latter today. So our current research builds on a study we published a year ago with the support of the Heinrich Böll Foundation on building Hungary's international political influence. This study provided an overview of the main goals, tools, and actors of influence building across different regions. The study's key finding was that the Orbán regime's influence building have several specific features that differ from the practice of democratic countries. Most importantly, the government's strategic aim is to ensure the regime's long-term survival domestically by creating a favorable foreign policy environment. Another specificity is that the influence building is not linked to institutions, but to parties and politicians based on mutual interests and ideology. The key tools of influence building also related to the influence in Hungarian minority communities are exporting illiberal ideas, policies, and practices, and gaining media influence. Gaining hegemony over Hungarian minority communities in the neighboring countries has long played a crucial role in Fidesz political strategies with two main aims. First, secure the votes of dual citizens in parliamentary elections in Hungary. And second, gain leverage in these countries to influence domestic political developments. The main tools of influence building among Hungarian communities have been financial support for organizations, bringing Hungarian political and social actors into dependency, investments into media and sports, and real estate purchases. Excellent journalists have extensively investigated this all. Nevertheless, no one has looked at the disinformation influence of the Hungarian government on these communities before. And that's what we have done. And here I pass the floor to my colleague Loránd.
Thank you very much, Bulcsú. Let me start by sharing with you our PPT presentation. So when it comes to the results of our research, I would like to touch upon three aspects of it. First, the focus of the content and media research and methodology. Secondly, the vulnerability of minority communities to disinformation, and also how regional local narratives were spread across these media spaces in neighboring countries. So when it came to the focus of our research, together with our partners and based on our previous research results, we identified the core elements of the Hungarian political agenda pursued by the Hungarian government that is also disseminated abroad. And we settled over 4 types of narratives that are about the Russian-Ukrainian war, sanctions against Russia, illegal immigration, and anti-gender narratives. To measure these narratives, we established a database of Facebook posts and web page articles through sampling media production of Hungarian-speaking media abroad that were considered by us and by our partners of being the main sources of disinformation in each country. So we put together a list of disinformation sources for each country, and then we gathered our data for the period from January the 1st until the 15th of July 2023 in 4 countries, Slovakia, Ukraine, Romania, and Serbia. And we also tried to analyze some of the contextual elements of media and disinformation production and the impact of disinformation on media consumption. Sorry, I have some problems with changing the, yeah, okay. Sorry, now it works. So when it comes to the regional and the overall pattern of the disinformation narratives, we could see that the Hungarian government's so-called pro-peace political messaging is dominating the media spheres abroad. So narratives about the war and sanctions made up 52% of our sample or content analyzed, whereas gender and migration accounted only 48%. When we look at the country-specific results when it comes to the type of narratives that they disseminate and reproduce, we could see that the most active was Slovakia, followed by Romania, then Ukraine and Serbia. There are 2 reasons for that. First of all, the largest diaspora communities are to be found in Slovakia and Serbia, Slovakia and Romania. And in accordance with the size of the minority populations, the largest media infrastructures and the most media activities are also found in those 2 countries, whereas in Serbia and Ukraine, the minorities are much less active in this regard. So if we analyze the actual contents of these narratives, then two aspects pop out. First, that, as I mentioned, the war and sanctions narratives is about the Hungarian government's call for peace and immediate ceasefire, and the casting the opposition and the Western partners as some form of warmongering actors who try to prolong the war in Ukraine or escalate it. Whereas another aspect of the core message of the war sanctions narratives were about Ukraine's fault in igniting the war or providing Russia with ample reasons to launch this offensive due to the limitation and deterioration of minority rights in Ukraine, including the Hungarian minority living in Transcarpathia. The gender and migration narratives mainly focused on anti-West messaging, keeping Europe a white Christian continent without any, mixed-race future. But the core message basically tried to contrast the West's responsibility for the war and the economic crisis, and Russia as a defender of its legitimate interests and traditional values, as opposed to the West that is incapable of doing that. When we look at the narratives on a country-by-country basis, we could identify two core messages that were present in all of the countries and dominated most of the discourses. The first is basically the same focus I was talking about earlier. In the media, ceasefire and peace are needed. And secondly, the message was about the repudiation of, the escalation of the war or arms transfer. When we look at individual countries, how they contributed to the reproduction or production of Hungarian disinformation narratives, we can see some slight differences. So in the Serbian media space, talked more about the Western elites' responsibility for the conflict, which is not surprising given the ongoing and re-emerging tensions with regard to the status or the fate of Kosovo. In Slovakia, the main message was related to the Slovak elections, and Robert Fico himself, who does not support Ukraine as much as the previous government, and talks about the fear of escalation of the war that could encompass, for example, Slovakia, by dragging Slovakia into the conflict directly. In Romania, the issue was about Hungary's energy security that was weakened by the decoupling of the European energy system from the Russian energy sources. And in Ukraine, the communication tried to blame Kyiv for any problems of the Hungarian minority, and pose the question as if only the Hungarian government would be able to defend the interest of the Hungarian minority living in Transcarpathia, which can be considered at least partially as a disinformation narrative, because given the war, it is evident that Kyiv is mainly responsible for the defense of the lives and livelihoods of Hungarians living in Ukraine, faced with this kind of Russian aggression that is ongoing since February 2022. We also try to provide a comprehensive analysis of the minority spaces' vulnerability to disinformation and these narratives, going beyond the actual numbers or ratios of disinformation narratives present in our sample. And we have come up with a typology of these 6 aspects, because we think that the vulnerability, basically the vulnerability to disinformation is basically resting on 3 core issues. The first is the number and ratio of disinformation produced by these communities or for these communities as a first aspect. The second aspect, the state of the freedom of media and freedom of speech in each of the countries under investigation. And thirdly, the integration between the minority and majority media spaces, because this kind of integration, for example, in the case of Romania, can enhance the immunity of ethnic Hungarians to the Hungarian government's disinformation, whereas the hybrid regime in Serbia could enhance the vulnerability of the Hungarian minority living in Vojvodina. So basically, the 6 aspects are based on our 3 basic criteria. Each country's rank in the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index, whether the second aspect is whether the Hungarian government has any allies in the majority societies abroad in political terms. The third aspect is about the Hungarian government's control or the extent of their control over the minority media spaces. The fourth is about the aforementioned integration of the majority and minority spaces. And finally, the fifth and sixth aspects are about the trust in media, which is quite low in every country except for Ukraine, and the number of the ratio of disinformation narratives that were produced by each country's minority media. And based on these aspects or dimensions and typology, we can see that Serbia can be considered the most vulnerable because the minority media and basically the political elite of the Hungarian minority in Vojvodina is almost entirely dependent on the Hungarian government resources. And it's significantly exposed both to the narratives, the anti-West and pro-Russian narratives to the Vučić and Orban regimes. And we are also talking about autocratic and monopolized media spaces where any critiques or any critical NGOs or media enterprises are either ostracized or silenced. And we considered Romania the less vulnerable in this respect because there is a fairly high degree of integration between the majority and minority media spaces, mainly when it comes to the TV consumption, TV channel, the use of TV channels, which means that ethnic Hungarians in Romania also consume Romanian media to a degree that can help them get an alternative point of view as opposed to the Hungarian government's propaganda and get more fact-based rational news items based on the majority media in Romania. The Romanian minority is also fairly less exposed to disinformation, and the majority of the media space there is more healthy. And finally, when we try to assess the broader impacts of the Hungarian government's propaganda and disinformation narratives and its security implications, then we can state 2 main important things. The first is that the Hungarian government's control over these minority media infrastructures and narratives opens up ethnic consumers there to disinformation. So they either consume more of those or they distrust the media even less. And this runs counter to any unified message coming from the EU, from the West in general, or the Euro-Atlantic community on core issues such as the war, Russia's role in the war, the sanctions, values, or why sanctions are needed against Russia, or how our region can be more secure in the long term in dealing with the Russian aggression on the proper terms in cooperation with our allies. When it comes to the national security concerns, we can say that the Hungarian minorities abroad are not a risk in terms of national security, rather they are a target of it. Target of it. because the Russian secret services conduct so-called active measures that try to create some scandals, create cross-border interacting tensions as it happened previously in the past. So we can identify three core elements of national security implications. The first is that the Hungarian government, either directly or indirectly through its media, is clearly fostering cooperation between illiberal actors and Hungarian actors, which helps to cement the Hungarian government's anti-Western and pro-Eastern messaging. Secondly, as I mentioned, there is a common messaging coming from the Euro-Atlantic Community, NATO, or the EU on how to deal with the current crisis in Eastern Europe and in Ukraine specifically. And that effort can be hampered, that strategic communication can be undermined severely, which has very significant national security considerations or implications in the longer term by the Hungarian government's messaging. And finally, there is a potential for regional destabilization because the Kremlin and the Kremlin's media from time to time tries to present Hungary, the Hungarian minority, or Poland, Romania, or Slovakia as actors who want to turn against Ukraine, divide Ukraine up, or reignite historical, ethnic tensions, and that's a real problem in our region that has seen those tensions causing enormous problems during the two world wars. So that's it for me, and now I yield the floor back to Gulcho. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurent, for your presentation. And we've already got one question in the Q&A section. Thanks for this. We will answer this during the panel discussion in writing. And now I'm turning to our dear panelists and esteemed partners, and we'll ask them a couple of questions to provide more context to what has been said by Laurent. First of all, I would like to ask you, and sorry, let me just introduce you again for those who might have joined later. So with us here today are Zoltán Sipos, Editor-in-Chief of Átlátszó Erdély, a Hungarian language investigative media outlet and watchdog in Romania, Karin Kőváry-Solymos, an investigative journalist at the Investigative Center of Jan Kuciak in Slovakia, and András Soltész, journalist at Város, a magazine in Ukraine's Transcarpathia region. And so I would like to ask you to give us a broad overview of the local Hungarian media landscape in your respective countries. Unfortunately, we have no time to dive very deep into this question. We just would like to, provide kind of a frame of our discussion and a basic understanding for our attendees. So what are the main actors with the biggest impact or biggest outreach in your countries in terms of Hungarian media? And to what extent do you think, or can this media landscape be considered independent? Zoltán, please.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. Very shortly, I'm a journalist living in Romania. I am covering the 1 million Hungarian minority community living in the western part of the country. If I want to summarize the state of media currently in this community, it is basically non-existent. It is a news desert. As a context, there has, in this community, there's no tradition of free media, at least not in the sense of the Anglo-Saxon freedom of the press meaning. So we never had a Washington Post or the Guardian or something like that. the media outlets usually traditionally never lived out of the market. They were always being financed by political actors or economic actors that had some sort of a stake in politics as well. This meant that like even in the 2000 like year 2000 when I started doing journalism, there was quite a bit of self-censorship present in the media. However, the different political actors had the interest to criticize each other through media. So basically, what we were seeing is that media belonging to one actor was criticizing and with the other one. And even though these media outlets were not free in the strict sense of the word, but if someone read them, if someone read the media outlets belonging to each political actor, then one could have a pretty good overview of what is happening. This is not the case anymore after Fidesz and the largest political actor, RMDS or UDMR or DAEJ, got into a kind of I would call it a symbiotic relationship because Fidesz needs RMDS and RMDS needs Fidesz at this point. After this happened, these political actors were not interested to publish critical pieces of each other anymore. So what one can see in the Hungarian media space right now is that it basically consists of dull copy-paste press releases with very little interesting content. And this also means that like even if there is a big subject on a local level that is investigated by journalists from Budapest, Bucharest, from us, they will never pick these stories up. Because the journalists, at least on the local level, they say that, well, like we don't want trouble. We don't want conflict. We don't want any conflictual relationship with those in power. So while the press is becoming more and more dull in these communities, we are seeing millions of euros that are being poured in by the Hungarian government. And this is kind of a very ironic situation, I believe, because this media sphere was always very poor. And we always said that, wow, if we had that money, that kind of money, how interesting, how vibrant media we could produce. And now we are seeing this huge amount of money coming in, and also see the media basically not providing its vital role, that of asking questions and holding the powerful accountable. As for the local media actors, there's like this huge media conglomerate financed by the Hungarian government. They own almost everything at this point, including the biggest internet news portal, which is Székelyhon. The local political party RMDS also owns a smaller share of media, namely Masol, which is, I believe, the second largest internet news portal, as well as a small television and a radio station. Also, there is public media, namely the Romanian public media has Hungarian editorial staff who are doing journalism in Hungarian, and also there are a few very small independent media outlets, which such as the local outlet UH.ro and also Transtelex and Átlátszó Erdély, that is us. However, media consumption of the Hungarian minority doesn't stop here. Actually, the big problem is that while there's this very dull, very uninteresting media content produced in Transylvania in this community, they are consuming more and more media coming from Hungary through the public media, as well as the private media channels. And we know that the disinformation and propaganda that is coming from Hungary is making a huge impact in this community. We already see that the opinions regarding the Ukraine war are more like the Hungarian opinions and less like the majority Romanian opinions. Also, one more characteristic of this media space is that the Hungarian minority consumes very little Romanian media. So even if the Romanian media space, like, I would not call it healthy, as you have put it, but it is definitely better than the Hungarian media space. But this doesn't really make any difference because Hungarians never read and never watch, or like very few Hungarians read and watch Romanian media. So in short, this is my context. If you have questions, please ask them, and I will be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Zoltan, for your answer. I can see myself echoing somewhere, but anyway, yes, Corinne, what are the main characteristics of the Hungarian media landscape in Slovakia, and what kind of differences or similarities do you see compared to Romania, for instance?
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the board of this really good cooperation, and it was a really, I think, really important project to analyze the minority media space and the disinformation that is present there. Shortly, when we are speaking about the minority media space in Slovakia, it's a really easy and general characteristic is that it suffers from a lack of human and financial resources. And this kind of a condition, which is also partly true for the majority media situation in Slovakia, makes this media environment more vulnerable to political influence. And we can see this political influence through the Hungarian subsidies that are flowing to the southern Slovakia. And we have to say that there is also space for this money or these subsidies to fill because of the mentioned lack of financial resources and also human resources. I think this condition that here is a really big influence in the subsidies, in the form of subsidies from Budapest. I think it makes a really important dividing line in this small minority media space. Whether the media receives support from Budapest or not. And this, after all, reflected also in their content. And we can see several examples of this in Slovakia. where the part of the media space gets the support, it needs to survive from Budapest, and then it is also visible in their content. I will just mention a few examples. We can see the Mas7 media family, which operates with 1.5 million euros Hungarian funding per year, and they got like funding slightly just from the Hungarian government. There are also other portals like felvidék.ma or Körkép. In these media, we can also see not just the money that are flowing from Budapest, but also really like strong ties to the former Hungarian Community Party, to the political circles that are in kind of a relationship or partnership with Fidesz. So I think in that sense, the situation is kind of similar to the Romanian one. On the other hand, I would say that we can still talk about independent media in southern Slovakia, independent Hungarian media. And although except for one example, they are perhaps, or they have not, don't have a perfect model, we can say that they are independent, because I would distinguish like an ownership independency and the content independency, because in Slovakia, for example, the biggest Slovak daily SME was also back in the time owned by oligarchs from Penta, but they managed to like remain independent in their content. So I would like, you know, make this distinction between these two kind of independency. For example, we have a daily newspaper, UJSZO, which tries to survive from the market and has also received small grants from the Slovak Minority Cultural Fund. I think the situation is kind of same in the case of Parameter online platform. And of course, it is also really important to mention the Hungarian broadcast of the Slovak public media. However, it is also important to note that the public media is a constant target of political influence by the government, by the powers. And the one exception that I mentioned before in case of independency is the Hungarian section of the daily Jenyik N, Napunk, which is trying to survive thanks to the readers' donations. And I think in terms of independency, I would say this is the best like model for that. Because in the other cases, for example, the daily newspaper UJSZO is owned by a business company. So, you know, there is also a possibility that it can be sold anytime. So it can end really easily, unfortunately, in the hands of oligarchs. So like shortly, this is the situation in Slovakia, in southern Slovakia, regarding to the minority media situation.
Thank you so much, Karin. Now I'm turning to András Soltész. How would you briefly describe or summarize the Hungarian media landscape in Ukraine, in Ukraine's Transcarpathia region? I suppose it's pretty much different from all the other, I mean, from the other two countries because of the situation of the Hungarian community, but also, of course, because of the war going on against Ukraine by Russia.
Yes, Bulcsi, you are absolutely right. Thank you. First, I would like to thank you very much for possibility being part of this project. I hope we will see good result and some good influence in media in Central Europe after when it will be published. I was listening to Zoltán, and more or less I can say that it's almost the same in Transcarpathia like in Romania, with this money from Hungarian government and independence or unindependence of media. I could say that mostly the two main actors, so the main actor is KMKS, it's cultural community of Transcarpathian Hungarians. Also Karpat Point in UA, Karpatoyo Weekly, like Transcarpathia Weekly, and the oldest newspaper, Karpatigos So, which can be translated Transcarpathian True Word. Actually, a few years ago, it celebrated 100 years of working and publishing. I would like to explain a little bit about tradition of consuming Hungarian media in Transcarpathia. I think the best times was in 70s, 80s, and 90s. So we had not just local media. So Hungarians in Transcarpathia were consuming Hungarian television, I mean, like from Hungary, and also like local television too. Then except local newspapers, we could read Hungarian books, listen to Hungarian different radio stations. We could read any magazines and about sport, about the like magazines for women, and so Ludos Moti and so on. So all these possibilities helped to minority to keep the culture, Hungarian culture, and to be in contact with Hungary. Yes, borders were closed and it was very hard to go anywhere, but through this media, books, and so on, so Hungarians could be could be together with Hungary, and traditions of consuming media and information from Hungary is still exist, of course, mostly in the older generations. But what is the difference? You mentioned, Burcu. Yes, of course, that the war influences all this process. So first, that when we talk about media, we have to understand that in first weeks or months of the full-scale invasion of Russia, about half of population of Hungarians left the country, and of course it's so it's very serious fact. On the other hand, we have to know that people here, Hungarians and Ukrainians and all the nations we have in this small region, they of course they are reading and consuming Ukrainian media too, because of course they are they want to be they want to know new information about the news, war, and all the stuff we have to know, because the situation is changing, and that means that even people who consume media and information only in Hungarian language, even they know this. They know that Russia fights not only on the front, Russia fights on the information field too. And of course, sorry. And of course, people closely monitor this, and they are close to their Ukrainian neighbors, friends, colleagues, and they know that they have to watch out and to don't believe to fake news or to some this information. So shortly like this, any questions I will answer. Thank you.
Thank you, András. Just a quick follow-up question. In our previous discussions, you mentioned, and also from our research, we know that actually it's not kind of enough to only look at the local minority, Hungarian language minority media, because also Hungarian minority communities in the neighboring countries many times also read or watch Hungarian news sources like Hungarian state television. And András, you mentioned in our previous discussions that there seems to be a difference, for instance, in the Transcarpathia region between people living in cities and people living in the rural areas in terms of what kind of news sources they consume. Could you just, in a couple of sentences, could you please elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. Of course, when we were talking with different people in the towns and the villages in Transcarpathia, I saw that there are quite big difference between traditions of consuming media. In villages, people more or less consume from Hungarian media, mostly state or private televisions, and in towns, Hungarians consume, let's say they consume like from Hungarian television, they consume mostly entertainment programs, but they prefer to consume news from Ukrainian media because I think they believe that Ukrainian media gets news on first hand most quickly, and they know what's happening in real. Also. In towns, Hungarians more involved with majority with Ukrainians, and they speak each other. They are in contact all the time, and they got some info and some influence from Ukrainians, and if we compare it with villages, so villages are quite a small social, like a small community, which is living a little bit, we can say, in the bubble. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I also asked this question just for context for our attendees, because from Slovakia and Romania, and also partly from Serbia, we have statistic data and news consumption of Hungarian communities, but we don't have any data from the Hungarian communities in Ukraine. Now I would like to ask you to speak a bit about how do you assess the Hungarian government's influence or dominating position in the Hungarian minority communities in your countries. Like, what do you think are the goals of the Hungarian government? You all spoke about how the Hungarian government has been influencing the media in your countries. It's not only, of course, about media, it goes beyond the media in many cases, but let's focus probably on the media and the public sphere. So what do you think might be the Hungarian government's goals to influence or dominate the public sphere in Romania, Zoltán?
That is a very good question. It is like speaking about these huge amounts of grants that are being poured in the public space in the Hungarian community. Frankly, I don't know what is the purpose of this. Simply because I had the opportunity to work in a in a different program that is awarding small grants to independent media, and I know that like how difficult and how sensitive the issue of media development is, and how a big amount of money can actually do more harm than good at a certain point. So it is a very good question why the Hungarian government decided to pour this money on these very small outlets. And it will be also, I believe, a very important case study to see after, let's say, 5 or 10 years where these media outlets ended up. My take on this is that this will not be a success story.
I'm sorry to jump in very quickly, but I mean, you know, providing support, financial support, but also probably other forms of support to, you know, minority communities in other countries, it could be, or it's a legitimate goal. I think it's kind of taking responsibility for your, you know, fellow ethnicity or your fellow people in other countries. But would you consider it? I mean, what the Hungarian government has been doing on this front, does it kind of remain within the framework of legitimate support of Hungarian minority community or Hungarian minority media, or does it go beyond it?
Providing support is indeed a very legitimate goal. The big question is how do you support NGOs, media outlets, and churches in a way that these empower these communities, these NGOs, and not become a choking point. Because sometimes too much money, too many big projects will actually do more harm than good. And it appears that the Hungarian government or the people that are deciding on these projects don't really have a good understanding of this very fine balance between helping to become more sustainable and actually helping too much, which causes basically the failure of the project.
Thank you. What's your take on this, Corinne? What do you think is the purpose of the Hungarian government in terms of Hungarian minority community in Slovakia?
I think we don't know the exact goals, to be honest, because we cannot read the mind of decision makers in Budapest, to be honest. So what I see and what I think is it's more about that they want to create a space where they can dictate the narrative, when the space that they can like dominate with their messages, and it's kind of an expansion of state propaganda beyond the borders, in my understanding. And if you see, or if you like, you know, read these supported media outlets, you can see how they like provide a space for the messages of Fidesz, how they are heavily like biased towards Fidesz, because you like cannot like read a critical but fair reporting about the Hungarian opposition, for example, and they also remain silent in the case of the scandals of Fidesz-linked politicians or businessmen. I think that was the case also connected to the former MEP Szájer, or the Pegasus scandal. If you opened like, you know, these outlets, there are no like real reporting about these issues. So they basically amplify their messages, narratives, and disinformation that comes from Budapest. And I think, yes, there is a legit like right, you know, be supported by the Hungarian government. We can see it as a tool how to strengthen the capacities of the minority, the Hungarian minority, for example, in Slovakia. But if you like giving a support, it's really funny when you like also ask for something in return. And that is what basically happening towards or through these subsidies. And I just want to like, you know, highlight one example, which was basically the story of a Slovak-Hungarian media outlet, Szabadújság, which basically lost subsidy because the then Hungarian Community Party just didn't get to the parliament, to the Slovak parliament. And that was basically the punishment, which they also, you know, talked about, that it was a punishment that they lost the subsidies, and that meant the end of Szabadújság. So I think it's really important to highlight also these examples, how they can actually Budapest can actually weaponize the support, the subsidies in this way.
Thank you, András. And what do you think are the goals of the Hungarian government in terms of the Hungarian community in Transcarpathia? Does the support or do the subsidies remain within, you know, kind of the legitimate goal to support the Hungarian community, or does it go beyond that? And or can we relate it also to a name which Karin just mentioned, or also Zoltán mentioned, that there are some, you know, questions asked in return, or to create dependencies?
Yes, I think it's because the Hungarian government want to create dependency, but also so like as you know, this region, our Transcarpathian region, is maybe the most poor if we compare it with other regions where the Hungarian minority is living in other countries. And as for me, so money which comes through grants, through Bethlen Gábor Foundation, Egan Ede Foundation, and so on. So this money help people to survive, help Hungarians to live better, help Hungarians even to work and like make money on their job. So in this hand, so from this point of view, I think it's quite good because in different ways and different spheres, this money helps people. But also probably the Hungarian government is trying to get votes in this way. Also, the numbers of votes cannot too small to seriously affect the outcome of any elections. And I can see also in some philosophical way, so perhaps the Hungarian government is trying to dominate, to show the European Union and to the world that Hungary is much bigger than it seems on the map, and that Hungary's influence in Central Europe is greater than it appears. And also, I think I will be not surprised if in 10 years we will know some secret information that will explain us that it was just like bad health of brain of politicians who are too long at the power, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. Zoltán, you raised your hand.
Yes, I would like to add to my previous intervention is that what we see as the Hungarian government is trying to create a sort of a virtual Greater Hungary abroad. So basically, not actually annexing back those territories, but persuading all Hungarians who are living abroad to kind of turn towards Hungary. And actually in Transylvania, there are communities, small circles that actually like live in a small Hungary or a small virtual Hungary. So you can live your life at this point, not having contact with the majority population. If you like your kids go to the Hungarian school, which is normal, and but then you can have a job at an NGO or at the church, financed partly by the Hungarian government, and then read the Hungarian news, and so on and so on. So you are physically living in Romania, but mentally you are part of Hungary, and this is what this system is all about, in fact.
I absolutely agree. I just wanted to add that, and maybe I mentioned it before, that with this virtual reality, you actually close the community to itself, which also like separate the minority from the majority. And if you have this kind of, close minority, you can also easily manipulate this minority community. If you build a really strong symbolical like relationship between Budapest and as they say, breakaway territories. And in this sense, the rhetoric of Viktor Orban is really important when they are like when he's speaking about the 15 millions of Hungarians in Europe, etc., etc.
Thank you. Now I would like to bring into the discussion one of the questions that we got in the Q&A section, which is about the seemingly lack of impact of the independent online media. So first of all, do you agree, or how would you consider the impact of independent online media in your countries? I mean, talking especially about the Hungarian language independent online media. And if you agree that there is and this lacks impact, then what do you think are the reasons are?
If I may, like
Sure.
jump in, I think we don't really have an answer for that about the impact, because there are like really lack of like surveys about the real impact of these media outlets, and not just the independent one, but also the supported one from Budapest. So we can, qualify how they're like reproducing the disinformation from Budapest, but it's a big question if there's like a real impact of it. And this is also true from the independent actors in the sense. So I think we just like really need urgently another surveys to better understand also the dynamics in this media space and how impactful they are in real.
How do you see this question in Romania and Ukraine, Zoltán and András? Zoltán, you mentioned in your first input that the Hungarian minority is like a news desert in Romania.
Sorry, what is the question? I'm sorry, I was reading the questions in Zoom and I wasn't attentive. Sorry.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So there is a question in the Q&A about the seemingly lack of impact of the independent online media. So, but do you agree that the independent online media, especially Hungarian language independent online media, lacks impact in Romania? And if you agree, then what do you think the reasons?
Yes, the question, like the person who asked the question is absolutely right. publishing online is much less expensive than having a print publication. However, as a founder of a small independent outlet, I know from my experience that actually being a publisher is a very it is not a very straightforward thing to do. So when I started, I was also very naive, saying that basically what I want to do is publish my articles online and that's it basically. No, it is a much more complex role. And to be able to enable journalists to start their own outlet is a much more complicated mission where that needs to be taught. At this point in these minority communities, there are no places where journalists who are interested in this kind of work can learn how to do it. So even though it is much less expensive, but then there are like being a publisher is a much more complex role, and this must be addressed as well.
As for me, I think that it's a part of a long, an old problem of our region that shortly smart people, educated people are leaving this region, and just simply there is nobody who can start a good online or offline independent media because who is young and wants to get a better future goes to big cities of Ukraine or to European Union and in Hungary, of course, to Hungary. And other hand, that people who could do this, who enough educated and smart and full of ideas, they already have a quite good job, and they just don't want to start another one.
Thank you. And we have a question specifically to András. It's about Hungarians in Ukraine. You mentioned that they have a kind of double vision, how the war is covered or how they see the war. Do you see this is reflected in their, like this double vision is reflected in their political views on the war of aggression and their views on the Hungarian pro-Russian policy in the war? Has anything changed since February 2022? And is there a visible discussion inside the community about it?
Sorry, I just finished reading the question.
Okay. So you mentioned that there is a, you know, that some Hungarians or some Hungarians in Ukraine, the Hungarian supported, I mean, the media, the Hungarian language media in Ukraine supported by Budapest offers a different view than the Ukrainian media in Ukraine, obviously. And the question is about whether this also causes kind of a different view or a double view on the on the current situation regarding the war. So do Hungarians have in Ukraine have a different view on the war than what is, you know, projected by the Hungarian media in Hungary? Is there discussion within the Hungarian community about this situation and how the war is projected or presented in Hungarian media and in Ukrainian media?
Okay, I get it. Thank you for the question. To be honest, I don't remember a case of some discussion in the Hungarian community about this view of war. I can imagine that there could be some discussions, but in a not public way. So I mean that the main actors, the chiefs of foundations or schools or university or mayor of Hungarian minorities, villages and towns could try to find some point of view in the first weeks or months of the full-scale invasion. And I can imagine they could discuss what to do next, how to behave in this situation, what we have to do with contact with Hungarian and Ukrainian government, and so on. But not in a public way. Another thing that, of course, the common people, common Hungarians in Transcarpathia, they see it in a different way, and so it depends on the generation, I think. Of course, we can talk about all the people who stayed in Transcarpathia who didn't leave the country, and they just mostly they are just tired about all of this, and they just want to live their everyday life. What about younger? I think there are few who can believe or listen to Orban's policy about it is not our war, and we don't have to support it with weapons and so on. And other young Hungarians who knows everything, and they know they stay on a Ukrainian side 100%. So, for example, I know I have a friend who had fled, who was living in Bucha. He's from Uzhgorod. He is Hungarian and finished Hungarian school here. From and quite old Uzhgorod Hungarian family, and he left Bucha just 2 or 3 hours before Russians came, and of course he see this situation in other from other point of view than a young man, the same young man, same age young man from a Hungarian village who is living here near the Hungarian border.
Thank you so much for your insights, András. There is also a question about Hungarian state advertisement in the local Hungarian media in your countries. The person asks or says or writes that we've seen in Hungary that the state advertisement or subsidies through state advertisements are a very important or effective tool in government-friendly media. Does it also happen in the local Hungarian language media in Romania, Slovakia, and Ukraine?
Yes, I have actually seen ads of some Hungarian state companies in local media. But this is by no means a very big thing at this point in the community. So yes, there are examples, but the majority of funding comes in through grants and not advertisements.
What's the case in Slovakia and in Ukraine with this regard?
Kind of similar, or maybe quite non-existence, I think, because the vast majority of the funding's just like flowing directly from Budapest, so there's no need to, you know, complicate the road of this money.
I saw some advertisement, for example, in Bereksas or in the small villages near the road, but it's looks like quite neutral advertisement, just like read our newspaper or something like that. So I don't think it's serious. So it's like a advertisement of any newspaper. But in other hand, so I don't believe that the advertisement help to sell more newspapers in Hungarian language, but but they do it, so I don't know why.
Thank you, András. Right, we also got a question on the research, and now I'm giving the floor to Laurent. One question is about the anti-investor narrative of keeping Europe Christian. How prevalent was this narrative in our data sets across the countries? And there's another question asking about whether we have detected any suspicious behavior on Facebook, like bots, fake accounts, spreading disinformation narratives in the minority communities. So Laurent, please.
Yes, thank you, Bulcsú. So on the first question, I can provide you with two answers. The first is that usually the Hungarian media's portrayal of the Kremlin or Russia is detailing not only the geopolitical role of Russia as a global world power and one that will win the war and is a very effective military, but it's portrayed as a Christian superpower that is representing basically family values, traditions, and Christianity, a form of holy trinity of values and interests. And that kind of perception is, I think, as the question rightly put it, is an underlying narrative of the Hungarian government's pro-Russian, pro-Kremlin rhetoric. On the other hand, it's kind of Christian Europe or Christianity was mostly prevalent in the sub narratives of the narratives on the war, which try to argue that Ukraine is not only set to fail in this war and Russia is undefeatable, but many arguments try to argue that the Ukrainian leadership should go because, you know, they are not only let's say corrupt, but they are anti-Christian in nature, which is is basically the Kremlin's talking point. So yes, we found this kind of sub narrative. It wasn't that prevalent, but in the end, it's part of how the Hungarian government tries to justify its position on Russia or the war in Ukraine or its anti-Ukrainian position. Regarding the role of bots and fake accounts, we did not found such traits of such malign behavior at the time of our research, but since then we have uncovered, as part of another research, a huge network of Hungarian trolls that are operational not only in Hungary, but in the Carpathian Basin, so in the minority communities and as well. So basically they are active on Facebook pages or public Facebook groups, and they are trying actively to penetrate these groups, including minority groups in Romania or in Slovakia. And secondly, they are trying to disseminate the Hungarian government's foreign policy positions, anti-Ukrainian messages. So right now we are talking about accounts we are talking about more than 600 accounts, and the count goes on our part. So the question is that we couldn't measure any such activity in the framework of this research, but our consequent research, which is being publicized step by step, that proves that yes, there is a significant inauthentic behavior when it comes to the war and the minority communities manipulation.
Thank you, Laurent. We have also a question to Karin specifically concerning the election campaign in Slovakia, and the question asks whether there have been any signs of a clear agenda in Budapest disinformation strategy towards the Hungarian minority in the election campaign.
To be honest, I don't think so, that there was a clear agenda towards the election, and I think also not really clear recommendations, because the situation of the Hungarian supported media was really complicated in that sense, that on the one hand they try to softly but recommend to vote for the Hungarian parties or the new emerged alliance party in Slovakia, Ethnic Hungarian Party. But on the other hand, it was really clear from Budapest that for Orbán it would be the best if Fico would win the election. So I think in that sense there was a quite complicated situation, conflict of interest, and that's why I think they just didn't want to just take this battle, to be honest.
Thank you, Karin. And the last question we have in the Q&A goes to András, and it asks whether the Hungarian government's influence has had any effect on the controversy over the use of the Hungarian language in Ukraine. What do you think, András?
I think not, but there are some new nuances. So because of Orbán's government policy, a lot of Ukrainians, of course, doesn't like it, and there are a lot of stereotypes about Transcarpathia. For example, quite a lot of people in Ukraine believe in the stereotype that so we in Transcarpathia cannot speak Ukrainian. Some people even doesn't understand why Hungarians are living in Transcarpathia, and so even if they never been here, so you can meet a comment somewhere on Facebook post about Orban that let's do something that Hungarians will go to live to Hungary. And this means that so the tension between Ukrainians who didn't live in Transcarpathia before, and they hardly understand what kind of region is it. Don't know the history of this region. Of course, so a lot of Ukrainians can blame Hungarian minority in Transcarpathia because of Orban's policy. Yeah. So in one hand, it's obvious, but if we talk about language in this region, so there is the same situation like before. But so we could say that Russians influence to the using Hungarian language in this region much more worse than Orban, because more or less half of Hungarians left Transcarpathia, and of course it means we will use Hungarian language less than before the war.
Thank you so much, András. We don't have any more questions in the Q&A. However, I wanted to ask you a final round, and please, and I'm asking you to provide me short answers. The question may seem to be a big question, but I think the answers will rather be short, unfortunately. And the question is about what to do or how to tackle disinformation from Hungary in the different countries. So what do you think would be, could be, should be the solutions? How independence, local media, Hungarian media could be strengthened, and what could be done, should be done against disseminating disinformation coming from Hungary?
Yes, my answer is very simple. The public media in Hungary should return to the public media values. And basically that would end the problem. Other than this, frankly, I don't know. At this point, disinformation coming from Hungary is so big. I don't really think any local project will be able to not stop but counterbalance it. So no, that will not work.
As I mentioned before, I think this is the $50 million question for that, and there is no easy solution and no simple answers. But I think we have to really start to rebuild the trust in media, in standard mainstream media. I think this is the only way. And the other thing is that I don't think we should, be looking for some separate remedies for minority media environment and majority media environment, because the problems that we are facing are quite the same, maybe not the same on the same scale, but they're basically the same. So I think the first thing is education. We have to make the citizens to fully understand what is journalism, to teach them to distinguish between propaganda and standard journalism and the norms of journalism. And I think this is the only way to teach them that what is the role of journalism in the democracy, that we are like the watchdogs for them, and we're not writing or articles for ourselves, but we are like writing it for the society. So education, I think this is the only way how to teach the society that it's not just about, you know, reading quality journalism, but also support media, and this is the only way to remain independent, also content wise and also ownership wise.
I absolutely agree with Zoltan and Karin, and I would like just to add that so as for me, I don't have a recipe for improving the independence of the local media here. We have to understand, of course, that funding is very important in this matter. And as long as Hungarian government has money and desire to fund foundations and institutions and media outlets in this region, it is too early to talk about independence. In addition, I would like to say that because of the war here, you know that men cannot be to other countries. They cannot leave the country to cross the border. Plus, people cannot plan their future. And for example, if we take a journalist or even a cameraman or any technical support in Hungarian local media, they have their job and they will keep it because they don't know what will be happen tomorrow. And so like when you live in a country where is a serious war, a terrible war, you think what to do tomorrow, but you cannot plan, and you value, you want to keep your job because you have it for now, and then who knows what will happen this winter or next year.
Thank you so much, András. And also, I would like now to thank to our panelists, thank to Laurent for his presentation, and definitely, last but not least, sincerely thank to all our attendees for participating, attending our event today. I hope it was useful, interesting, and also insightful for you. And as I said, we will publish the study next week, and we are happy to share it with you, send it to all of you who attended today's webinar. So with this, I'm closing this session. Thank you again for all of you and wishing you a good day.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.